All right, let's continue on with our discussion of the analysis paper and the main tasks of the body of that paper. So there's three main things that I'm asking you to do in order to be able to conduct this analysis, and those are here. The first is to review the theory that you've chosen to conduct the analysis with. So your theory is like your analytical framework. It's going to help you do the analysis. In this section, you introduce us to the theory and teach us about it. In the second section of the paper, you're going to provide background and description of the event that's going to be analyzed. So I don't know what the thing is, likely. Give me a sense of what it is by giving me all important background information and a kind of basic description of what happened. And the third and final task of an analysis paper and the third section of your paper will be what we're calling the analysis and implications. And this is where you actually perform the analysis. You actually take that theory, you apply it to the event in order to kind of dissect or unpack that event, label its parts, show how the parts work together, and then discuss what you learned or what were the implications of the analysis. And that's the final part of the paper. It's also the most important part of the paper. And so I want to emphasize once again that idea of the iterative process. If you're waiting to the very last minute to write the last section, you might be out of energy and you're going to short shrift the most important part. These three should be kind of written a little bit at a time, making adjustments to each as you go so that there's symmetry between them. And yeah, the analysis is the kind of most important part of the paper. Everything in 1 and 2, everything in the review of theory and the background and description of the event is anticipating and preparing the reader for the analysis. And the implications are kind of, the findings. So it's pretty important stuff. So all sections are important, but certainly in the analysis section is especially important for an analysis paper, as you might imagine. Let's dig into each of these, starting with the review of the theory section. Here's where you're going to thoroughly define and explain the central theory you've chosen and all smaller related concepts that you're going to use in your analysis. You really want to focus in on the parts of the theory that you actually end up using in your analysis and not spending a lot of time on parts of the theory that you don't end up using in the analysis later. So define all your terms by paraphrasing, using your own words, drawing from credible sources. And those sources include, of course, our course readings, my lecture videos, and I'm going to show you a list of essays that I have provided you that will also help you paraphrase and define your theories. You can, in addition to paraphrasing, you can also quote sparingly. And so I just want to say just a few quotes, right? Not very long quotes. Don't overquote in your paper or use quotes that take up much more than one line at a time. So paraphrasing is better. And then the third strategy you can use when defining things would be to give a quick example, give a hypothetical example that is unrelated to the events that you're going to be talking about later. And that's important that the examples that you give here aren't drawn from your main event because you're going to save that for the analysis section. So don't talk about your main central communication events here. Just give quick hypothetical examples to help us understand what the theory is talking about. Explain all quotes, explain all examples. Essentially, you just want to assume that I don't know what these theories mean and teach them to me. you want to start with a broad view or a broad explanation of what the theory is. What type of human communication is this theory trying to explain, and then offer up that theory's explanation and define all the various terminology and concepts that are within that theory or concept. You can use, to help you do this, I'm going to just jump off this page for a second. To help you do this, in addition to the course readings and the lecture videos, I've provided a resource here that says Writing Resource Sources for Review of Theories. And I guess I closed that out, but let me click on that. And it's just going to give you a chart here with each of the theories that you can use: social penetration, politeness. I'm going to talk more about these later. And below them, you'll see PDFs. And those are supplemental reading materials that will really help you in your papers. So check that out, please. And so I expect when you're reviewing your theory that you're drawing heavily from credible sources of information that I've provided you with. You can read more about defining in a previous page on Canvas. Let me just show you that really quickly. In the modules, there was a previous page. I'm going to cover my face here. There was a previous page called Writing to Demonstrate Our Understanding of Terms. Hopefully you've seen this. Take a look at this video. It's going to give you a lot more information about how to go about defining in your papers. So, okay, moving on to the next main task of the paper, task number 2, which is to give a background and description of the event. I haven't had a chance to observe your life. I'm not a witness to it. I don't know your experiences. I don't know the groups that you're involved in. I don't know where you work. I don't know about your relationships, right? So since haven't had a chance to observe these things, this is your place to kind of give me all the key necessary information that I need to understand what's going to be analyzed here. So give me all the necessary background information and describe to me kind of the nature of the event in a way that, any observer of what happened would likely agree with. So just a basic objective description of what happened here. Help me understand what's going to be analyzed. It's important that you don't begin your analysis here. What do I mean by that? Well, in this section, you're going to focus on just giving me a description of the who, the what, the where, and the when. Kind of, what's the scene and what happened. You can save how it all happened, what were the mechanisms, what was kind of the communication process that was involved, and the why for your discussion of the analysis and implications. In this section, you're just kind of setting the scene. Tell me all the important information about the events that will be relevant to the analysis that's coming later in the paper. And you don't have to tell me all of what happened in the event, because you will continue to reveal more details and to dig deeper into the events of the communication that's being analyzed. And you'll do that in the analysis. You'll keep going. But make sure that here that you are setting the scene. Okay, so that takes us to the analysis and the implications section of the paper. And I'm going to talk about this in two parts. First, I'll talk about the analysis, and then second, I'll talk about the implications. This is the last and most important section of the analysis paper, and it's where you're going to actually conduct the analysis. And you're going to do this by applying the central theory to the main events in order to discuss, what the concepts, what the theories reveal to us about these main events. And then after you've done that, you're going to go on to talk about the implications, which is where you'll discuss what you learned from this analysis. But to talk more about analysis, you're essentially unpacking and dissecting the events using the communication theory that you've defined earlier. So you're going to take this theory, this explanation, and you're going to use it to help you label the various parts of the things that are going on in the communication process you're analyzing. And you're going to explain your interpretation of those parts using the theory. And you're going to show how these things kind of all work together to explain how and why what happened the way that it happened. Now, some theories and concepts might also allow for evaluation in addition to interpretation. So where appropriate, you can evaluate the effectiveness or the ethics of the communication. You might consider alternate ways of communicating. So let's say you're analyzing a conflict between two people. Maybe there were some things that were done in this communication that were ineffective. There was some blaming going on. Or maybe there were some ethical problems with the communication. You can, as part of your analysis, consider alternate ways of communicating as well. So, using the central theory you choose from the list provided, unpack and dissect the communication events, label the various parts, explain those parts, and show how they all fit together in the accomplishment of either relational or task-related goals in the relationship. Where appropriate, evaluate the effectiveness, consider alternate ways of communicating. What this analysis and evaluation will ultimately look like will depend greatly on the central theory and event that you choose. Going on with this section to talk more about the implications, you should consider the implications of your analysis. That is, you should consider what you, a communicator, a student of communication, what have you learned from the analysis about how we can better understand and practice communication? Did the analysis teach you anything about the theory? Might be another question we ask. Did the analysis validate or complicate the communication theory that you used? Does the analysis show that the theory is insightful or applicable? Did the analysis challenge aspects of the theory? What does the analysis teach students of communication about how we should think about communication or talk about communication, or just go about actually doing communication? What was learned from the analysis that you've provided? Make sure you spend some time in the analysis and implications section discussing what can be learned both personally for you and as a community of scholars interested in learning more about communication. So that is the last of the 3 tasks that I wanted to talk about. But I do want to show you, before we finish this discussion, the writing resource where I dig further into these and I give you a good illustration of them. And I'm not going to go over them word for word here. I just want you to read it. It's in the modules. It's under Writing Resource, Applying Communication Concepts in Analysis. And it looks like this. It's going to break down, again, task number 1. There's a link to that previous video where I was talking about writing to demonstrate our understanding of terms. It's going to talk more about task number 2 and give some examples of that. And it's going to talk about task number 3 as well. But I want to show you down here at the bottom this extended example, which is going to be color-coded. It's still way shorter than what you're going to end up writing about in your papers, But it uses a communication theory to analyze a personal experience I had with communication, and it's going to use quoting, paraphrasing, examples, description, analysis, and implications, and they're color coded here. So do take a look at this and read it. I think it'll be very helpful for you. In the first part here, I'm reviewing the theory, then I'm describing the events, and then I'm offering my interpretation and my implications, that what you see here. So that's going to be super helpful for you. I think it can give you an idea of the kind of writing that I'm asking you to do in the analysis paper and in the three main writing tasks. Okay, have a little bit more to talk about with this paper, but we're almost there.